Hello everyone. Today we will be doing the third chapter, that is absorption by roots. Now, first of all, what is root? Root is the organ of a plant that helps to absorb water and minerals. But first of all, let's try to see from where do these roots originate. Take for example, this is the seed. Okay, here you have the embryo. Okay, when this seed is sown and when it germinates, okay, before to that the upper part you call it as epicotyle, the lower part you call it as hypocotyle. Epicotyle, it gives rise to plumule. Plumule will give rise to shoot system. Hypocotyle give rise to radicle. Radicle develops into root system. There are more than 4 different types of root. Okay, but usually generally let's try to see that this hypocotyle in the embryo there are compact cells. Okay, hypocotyle lower, hypo means lower, ep means upper. So hypocotyle, cotyle what is coming from? Cotyledon, hypocotyle. That afterwards the cell differentiates, it gives rise to radicle. The radicle further due to absorption of water it gives rise to the root system. So generally you see the vertical growth of this root, okay, the structure of hypocotyle or radicle give rise to the root system. Primary root, secondary root, from here tertiary root, and then you have the root heads. So this root heads, okay, this root heads is the extension of, it is the extension of epidermal cells. Okay, I have a slide which I will show you later on. Okay, so generally root, there are so many types of root, but generally a root, primary root, secondary root, tertiary root, root heads. The root heads are the extension of epidermal cells. Root heads only absorb water and minerals. So in this chapter we will be discussing about how do this root absorb water and minerals. How do they absorb water and minerals? Why do they have to absorb water and minerals? You know that the producer in this world, it is autotrophs. So when I say autotrophs, okay, the organism autotrophs, the organism that can prepare their food by themselves, by itself, they are referred as autotrophs. So when this plant make the food, so when they are preparing the food by the process of photosynthesis, during the process of photosynthesis, there is a necessity of certain types of minerals and water. With these minerals and water, the plant is able to photosynthesize. Now, let's see that in this, how do this plant absorb water and minerals? So in this chapter we will be learning about how do this plant absorb water and minerals. So first of all, let's try to see that what is the role and need of water and minerals for the plant. Number 1, water constitute more than 80% of the cell protoplasm. That means each and every part of the cell, okay, the root which has number of cells out here. If we say in a cell 80% of the protoplasm contains water. So thereby if the water contains in the cell, that means the there is a good regulation of the mechanism that happens in the plant. Okay, the protoplasm remains active, and due to that there is an exchange of minerals, there is an exchange of various types of ions. So water constitute more than 80% of the cell protoplasm. If the protoplasm is living in the state, living in nature, then you have to understand the plant is also living in nature. Otherwise, if water does not exist in the protoplasm, it may lead to different consequences. Next part, water is needed for various physiological activities. So when I say water is needed for various physiological activity, what do you understand? In the plant, okay, the various types of physiological activity like photosynthesis, transpiration, translocation, respiration, and so many other important activities that goes inside the cell, it is just due to the presence of water. If water does not exist in the plant, if the root does not absorb water, then all this physiological activity stops. You will find that a wilted plant, the plant that has wilted, you will find that no activity goes in this plant body. Why? Because the protoplasm does not contain water. Next one, water is a universal solvent. So when I say universal solvent, okay, when I say universal solvent, what does it mean? Water has the property to dissolve any substances. So here you see in the different soil, in the soil particles, okay, in the soil particles, each of these soil particle contain minerals, they contain minerals. So these minerals needs to be dissolved, minerals needs to be dissolved. So who dissolves? Okay, who dissolves? Then water is only the medium, water can only dissolve the minerals. So afterwards, when the minerals get dissolved, the root hairs can easily absorb this water and minerals. That means the availability of minerals is just because water acts as a universal solvent. It has the property to dissolve any substances. And you will come across so many different types of plants. Okay, when we consume, we get the taste of different plants. The taste of that different plant is due to the different types of minerals. Apple taste is different, orange taste is different, grapes taste is different. Similarly, each and every vegetables, each and every cereal crop that we eat, that we consume, have different types of minerals. These minerals, from where they are available? They are available from the soil. How it is available? It is available because water dissolves these minerals. Due to that, the root hairs absorb it, transport it to the leaves, okay, transport it to the leaves. In the leaves, photosynthetic activity takes place, and due to that the plant produces the food. So here you see water is acting as a universal solvent. Next one, water provides turgidity to the cell. You will come across whenever any plant, okay, in the living condition, when you see this plant, you will find that they are erect, okay, they are erect. Each of these cells are formed in nature, okay, the cell are formed in nature. The cell is formed in nature, the plant is erect in nature, okay. It is due to this firmness in the plant is due to the turgidity of the cell. The turgidity of the cell is only because of the water has got absorbed by the root hairs into the plant body, and due to the presence of the water in the each and every part of the cell in the protoplasm, which makes the plant form in nature, we call it as turgid. Next one, soil water contains essential mineral nutrient. That means in the soil particle, okay, in the soil particle, and whatever the water is existing in the soil, okay, what it has various essential nutrients. And what are those nutrients? Nutrient like very essential. When I say essential nutrient, you have to understand the nutrients that the plant requires for the normal functioning, okay. Like you have potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus. These are required in larger amount. These are required in good quantity. Therefore, they are called as essential mineral nutrients. Deficient of these mineral nutrients may cause some type of deficiency disorder in the plant. Similarly, you have other mineral nutrients also which you require in less quantity. When the plant requires these minerals in less quantity, what do you call it? You call it as trace mineral nutrients, like you have manganese, zinc, copper, molybdenum and boron. These are the mineral nutrients that the plant require in lesser quantity, and if the soil contains these minerals, that means you are going to get a very good harvest of the plant. The food quality, the fruit quality, everything becomes good enough when the soil contains enough nutrients. Next, now let's try to understand the adaptation. What makes the plant, what makes the root absorb water and minerals? What makes it? How are these plants adapted to absorb water and minerals? So you have to understand, root is the organ of the plant that helps to absorb water and minerals. So what makes it? Okay, what is the structure present out here? Why it makes the root absorb water and minerals? What is the reason behind it? First of all, you have to understand, roots are hydrotrophic. Okay, so when I say roots are hydrotrophic, what do you understand by roots are hydrotrophic? Hydro, the word hydro means water. Okay, the word HYDRO, hydrotrophic. Hydro means water. Okay, tropic means movement. That means the part of the plant that moves towards the source of water, the part of the plant, which part of the plant? Root moves towards the source of water. That is why you call it as hydrotrophic. Movement of the part of the plant moving towards water, the term we use is called as hydrotrophic. So roots are always hydrotrophic. Always you will come across, suppose say you have a plant out here. Okay, you have a plant, this is the root. Suppose say in this direction, okay, here there is a presence of water. Okay, you will find all the roots directing to this region. Okay, where the water is present, all the roots will be directed to this region. That means root is moving towards the source of water. That is why they are called as roots are hydrotrophic. Next thing, you can also use one term called as positively hydrotrophic. Positively hydrotrophic. Okay, that means most of the root, what do? They grow towards the source of water. So when they are growing towards the source of water, we use the term called as positively hydrotrophic. There is one more thing. There are roots which comes out of the soil. Okay, which comes out of the soil like this. Okay, there are roots which comes out of the soil. You call it as breathing root. Okay, these are called as breathing root or pneumatophores. Pneumatophores. That means breathing roots are called as pneumatophores. You will find it in some of the plant, mangrove vegetation, especially there in marshy area. You will find some of the root coming outside. Okay, they instead of growing vertically downward, they grow above. Such type of roots are called as breathing root, or you call it as pneumatophores. Okay, this is not there in a syllabus, but just to make you understand regarding what do you mean by positively hydrotrophic and all, there are roots which come out of the soil and they are called as breathing roots. So you mangrove vegetation mostly have the breathing roots. Anyway, roots growing towards the source of water, you call it as hydrotrophic. Another one, roots are positively geotrophic. You will find all the roots, what do? They grow, okay, they grow along the gravity, towards the gravity, okay, towards the gravity in this direction. So when the roots, the part of the plant that is growing towards the gravity, what is the term used out here? Positively geotrophic. Geo means gravity. growing towards or along or towards the source of the gravity, along with the gravity, you call it as positively geotropic. Roots have large surface area. Okay, roots have large surface area. What does it mean? You see that primary root, then secondary root, then again tertiary root, and from here you will find numerous microscopic root hairs. Okay, microscopic root hairs. Now, how much is this root? How much is this root hair? 1 square millimeter. Okay, 1 square millimeter approx. Okay, approx there are around 200 root hairs. So when I say 1 square millimeter, what do you mean by it? 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. In this 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, they are around approximately 200 root hairs. So these 200 root hairs, when they are present in just an area of 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, just imagine in the whole the root system, in all the root system, when I say root system, the primary root, secondary root, tertiary root and root hairs, just imagine how much root hairs are present, and these root hairs, they facilitate in absorption of water and mineral. That means they increase the surface area for absorption. Okay. Next one is root hair cells have a thin wall. That means here the root, the type of cell that is present, okay, it has a very thin wall. Okay, this thin wall facilitates for easy diffusion, permeability. The water and minerals can easily penetrate inside, can easily get inside, and due to that, it makes access for the plant to absorb water, and it facilitates for easy absorption of water and minerals. So here you see that these are the characteristic feature of the root. Due to that, it facilitates in absorption of water and minerals. Okay, so here you see, here I have taken the picture, and now you see the root hairs. Okay, at the tip of the root you have the root cap and the root tip. Now, one cell when I have taken it out here, that means what do you find? You find each of these are epidermal cell. This epidermal cell, that means you see due to the action of water, okay, we'll come to that physiological part afterwards. What has happened? Epidermal cell has got extended. Epidermal cell has got extended. This epidermal cell that has got extended only results in root hair, full grown root hair. That means this is fully grown root hair. And what do you come to know? You see that the cell wall, cell membrane, then inside part, this part is the cytoplasm. Then you have every cell contains a nucleus. Okay, every cell contains a nucleus, and because of these features, okay, because you see another small root hair being grown, it is not fully grown, but it is growing. Here also you see a small bird-like structure is getting formed. This is also what is happening, root hair is emerging. So this way, from each and every epidermal cell there is a formation of root hair, and more the root hair, more will be the absorption of water and minerals. Next, now this absorption of water and minerals, okay, there are certain factors by which the plant can absorb water and minerals. Now, what are the factors? When I say factors, that means if a plant has a well saturated soil, okay, water is saturated, soil contains enough minerals and all, then do this plant absorb water and minerals? So you see that under circumstances, you see that the plant, although having all this condition, the plant may be able to absorb water. And so what are the factors? Number one factor is that the soil temperature. Soil temperature is a must. You see that even if all the factors are given, say for example in places, okay, 75 degree, 40 degree, 50 degree temperature is there, during that time, what is going to happen? So here, when I'm talking about factors affecting absorption and water, in what condition the plant is able to absorb water and minerals? In a good condition. Then number one factor is soil temperature. What do you mean by soil temperature? The temperature of the soil. So the temperature, the optimum temperature of the soil should be 20 degree to 30 degree. I'm talking about soil temperature. I'm not talking about atmospheric temperature. So soil temperature should be around 20 to 30 degree. If any soil temperature is 20 degree to 30 degree centigrade, at this optimum temperature, the plant is able to absorb water and minerals. Lesser to that, it will affect. Higher to that, it will affect. And it is due to this ideal temperature, the places which has the soil temperature 20 degree to 30 degree centigrade, you have a very good cereals crop, you have a very good agricultural land, and most of the agricultural state, country they have the soil temperature of 20 to 30 degree centigrade. You will not find much of the agricultural land in the places where the soil temperature is very less or very high. The soil temperature plays a very important role in the absorption of water. Another thing is concentration of soil solution. So when I say concentration of soil solution, that means you see that there are soil which may be highly acidic in nature, highly alkaline in nature. That means you see that the plant where it is thriving, okay, what type of plant it is there, which type of agricultural crops is there. Some of the plants, they love the acidic medium, some of the plant, they love the alkaline medium. It depends plant to plant. But you see that the plant should have a optimum soil concentration. That means it should neither be acidic, it should be neither be alkaline in nature. That means the determination of this soil solution concentration is determined by a scale. You call it as pH scale. Okay, pH scale determines the concentration of the soil solution. The acidity and alkalinity of a soil is determined by a scale. You call it as which scale? You call it as pH scale. Another factor that is very important for the absorption of water and mineral is aeration of soil. What do you mean by aeration? The word aeration means introducing air into the soil. Introduction of air into the soil is called as aeration of the soil. If the soil is well aerated, what is going to happen? It will facilitate in absorption of water and minerals. The plant is able to conduct, the plant is able to transport water and minerals to the leaf easily. That is why you see that the farmers, what do? Before they sow the seed, what do? They plow the field. Okay. And sometimes you see that the plants grow to a certain height. What do the farmers and all do, gardeners and all, what do? They go for tillage, turning the soil. So the turning the soil and after that irrigating it, after watering the plant, facilitates in absorption of water and minerals. Now you see that there are various processes for the absorption of water and minerals. Okay, various process according to your ICSE syllabus. What do you have? You have total 6 different process given for the absorption of water and minerals. Number one is diffusion. Number 2 is osmosis, then imbibition, turgidity, flaccidity, and then active transport. Okay, these are the number of process by which the plant absorbs water and minerals. First of all, what is diffusion? Okay, now first process is diffusion. So what is diffusion? The free movement of molecule of substances from the region of the higher concentration to the region of the lower concentration is known as diffusion. That means molecule moving from a region of higher concentration to the region of lower concentration. If this movement of molecules move from high to low, the process is called as diffusion. Take for example, this diffusion may take place in solid, liquid and gas. Suppose take for example, if I take a naphthalene ball, okay, if I take a naphthalene ball, naphthalene ball, when you just take it out from the packet, here you see that the molecules are concentrated. When it comes in contact with air, then what will happen? The molecule starts diffusing it. The molecule starts diffusing it. Okay, diffusing it. Here, what do you have? You have the molecule of higher concentration. Higher concentration. The molecules are packed. Okay, higher concentration. It is compact. Now, what will happen? It is moving to the region of lower concentration. Here you see that lower concentration. Okay, lower concentration. This area is air out here. Okay, so camphor, you have taken naphthalene ball. You opened it from the packet. Slowly the molecules start diffusing it. Molecules is moving from higher region to lower region. So here what do you see? The movement of molecules from higher concentration to lower concentration. This type of movement of molecule, you call it as what? Diffusion. Similarly, let's try to take the another example in the liquid. So in the liquid, you see I have taken a diagram out here. In this case, a beaker is taken, a test tube is taken, then potassium permanganate. Okay, or you can take blue ink, red ink, whatever you take. First initially you put it. Then what will happen? The blue ink or red ink or potassium permanganate, it will settle down. Slowly, what is happening? This is the region of lower concentration. This is the region of higher concentration. You have the potassium permanganate, you have the blue ink, red ink in the lower part. This is more area, higher concentration area. Slowly what will happen? This potassium permanganate will start diffusing it. It will move from higher to lower. And finally, in the sea, you will find that fully after some time, you will find totally what has happened. It has, if it is potassium permanganate, it will turn purple color of crystals evenly distributed. That means the potassium permanganate crystal will keep on moving, and unless and until the whole water turns fully purple in color. That means the molecules are evenly distributed. It is not that the lower part you will find a darker color, upper part, the middle part fainter, and the upper part no color. You will not find it. You will find the whole solution turns purple depending upon what type of color you have taken. So here what is happening? The molecules is moving from higher concentration to lower concentration. Similarly, if you take a perfume, okay, if you take a perfume, bottle, you opened it up, then slowly you will get a very strong smell. Slowly what will happen? The smells will proceed, and finally the whole room gets the aroma, gets the smell of that perfume that you have used. So what is happening? The molecule is moving from a compressed bottle to the region of lower concentration. It keeps on moving unless and until it becomes uniform in nature. This process of movement of molecule from a higher concentration to lower concentration, you call it as what? Diffusion. And here the type of movement of this molecule is haphazard. It is not that they move accordingly. Okay, here suppose, say for example, here the molecules are moving in any direction. It may move in any direction. This movement of this molecule in haphazardly, what do you call it? You call it as Brownian movement. Okay, any molecule that move in a random manner, randomly they start moving here and there, and finally what will happen? The molecules, all the molecules become uniform in nature, uniformly distributed. Then this type of random movement of the molecule, what do you call it? You call it as Brownian movement. Brownian movement, where you observe in diffusion. So again I repeat, what is diffusion? The free movement of molecule of a substance from the region of their higher concentration, whether it is solid, liquid or gas, to the region of lower concentration is known as diffusion. So how do we relate with the plant? Then take for instance, like say you have a plant, okay, the root is here. Suppose, say for example, here, okay, these are the soil particles. Okay, Here you have more water. You have more water. You have less. Okay. The minerals are more out here. Automatically, the water dissolves the minerals. That minerals will start moving towards this direction. So it is moving from higher region to lower region. So in the absorption of water and minerals also, what will happen? Wherever the concentrated chemical compound are there, this concentrated chemical compound remains in one place. This movement from a higher region to the region of lower region, because you see that what happens, the plant utilizes the minerals, so automatically this area will be low, so it will start moving from higher region to lower region. So the movement of molecule, whether it is water, whether it is mineral, whether it is salt, any type of chemical substances, they move from a higher concentration to lower concentration. Next, now what is importance of diffusion? Now we already came across what is diffusion. So here you see that it is one of the process in which the plant absorb water and minerals. Overall, we will be coming across that each of these process, how do they get implied in absorption of water and mineral. Number one is that importance of diffusion in plant physiological activity. Number one is the exchange of gases. What do you mean by exchange of gases? Here you see in the plant, okay, the plant takes in carbon dioxide. The plants take carbon dioxide. Why the plants take carbon dioxide? Because you see that this carbon dioxide, okay, carbon dioxide has been used, okay, sunlight, chlorophyll, carbon dioxide, water. The plant is going to make C6H12O6. This is the food the plant will prepare. So carbon dioxide has been utilized by the plant to make food. So carbon dioxide is already used up. So when it is used up, this carbon dioxide, where it is present? It is present in the atmosphere. So automatically in the atmosphere, what do you have? You have high concentration. Okay, you have high concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, whereas in the plant, what is happening? The carbon dioxide which is there inside the leaf, which is there inside the plant, has been already used up for making food. That is carbon dioxide plus water, sunlight, chlorophyll. The plant is able to make food. C6H12O6, that is glucose. Okay, the plant is able to make starch type of food, glucose type of food. It is already being used up, so automatically this area becomes low. Okay, area becomes low, so automatically what will happen? The carbon dioxide starts moving from the atmosphere to the leaf. Similarly, what will also come out? You see that oxygen, this oxygen that was produced during the process of photosynthesis. Okay, that means during the process of photosynthesis, when the food is being prepared, oxygen comes out as a byproduct. So it is made out here. So automatically in this, oxygen level becomes high concentration. So automatically what will happen? It will come out to the atmosphere. Why? Because we are using the oxygen. So oxygen become deficient. So plant gives out oxygen. So in the plant, the concentration of oxygen is more, whereas in the atmosphere, the concentration becomes less because we are using it up. So thereby the oxygen comes out. This exchange of gases is also due to higher concentration to lower concentration, and this physiological activity takes place by the process of diffusion, that we call it as the exchange of gases. Next one, number 2, loss of water in the form of water vapor. You see that so many roots are there. The root contains root hairs, and in the previous part I told you that 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, there are around 200 approximately root hairs. So when there is more surface area for the absorption of water and minerals, the water, when it is being absorbed by the plant, the water becomes excess, the water becomes more. That means in the plant body, when the water becomes more, this excess of water needs to come out. So how it comes out? It comes out by the process of diffusion only. So the loss of water in the form of water vapor. There is a loss of water in the form of water vapor, that is also due to the plant has excess of water, high concentration, moving to the region of lower concentration. This is by the process of diffusion. Another one, distribution of ions throughout the protoplasm. Each and every part of the cell, okay, each and every part of the cell in the plant, you see that each and every part, each of the root hair, each of the system of the root, plant, shoot, leaf, flower, each and every part of we living organisms are made up of cell. And you have to understand the protoplasm. Okay, the protoplasm is the physical basis of life. Is the physical basis of life. That means life exists because protoplasm is in a living condition. So that is why protoplasm is the physical basis of life. So in the protoplasm, in order to make the protoplasm living in the condition, what has to be there? There has to be evenly distribution of what? Ions. When I say ions, the charged particle of a element is referred as ions. So who distributes these ions evenly? Each and every part of the respective part of the cell, it is the water. Okay, it is the water, and in the water also you see that it is by the process of the diffusion, it is because of the process of diffusion that the ions get evenly distributed. So today we have finished one of the part of process of absorption of water and mineral, that is diffusion. Next class we will deal with some of the other process of absorption of water and minerals. Thank you.
My dear students, today's lesson is a continuation of the same chapter, chapter 2, work, power, energy. Today we are going to do numerical problems. So write down the important formulas which will be used to do numerical problems in this chapter. Work, W formula we have, force into displacement. Work from another formula, work we have when there is angle, so Fs cos theta. When we are finding the work done to lift a body to some height and all, so that time the formula work changes and it becomes mgh for lifting a load to some height. That time we can directly use the formula work, W is equal to mgh, and the logic is force will be equal to the weight of the body. Weight of the body and the effort will be same because you have to give equal effort to lift the body up, and the displacement will become h. So F value is mg and displacement value is height. So it formula becomes mgh. So these are the formula which will be used for calculating work. Now this is the first formula. Second formula is power. Power formula is work by time, and the other formula of power is Fv. So depending upon the situation, we'll pick up a formula, one of these, and then find the answers. When time is given, so we'll use this formula. When force is given, to calculate power, we'll be using this formula. So there are two formulas for power as well. One is this, another one is this. And the third formula we have potential energy. Potential energy denoted by U, formula is same as this, mgh, and kinetic energy denoted by K, the formula is half mv square. So these are the formulas, and in some situation we will apply the work energy theorem, that is work done by a body is equal to change in kinetic energy, half m bracket v square minus u square bracket closed. So, these are the formulas you will be coming across while doing numerical problems. Unit for work will give joule, that is the SI unit. Unit for power will give watts or joule per second, and unit for energy is also same as the unit of work, that means joules. So, these are the formulas we are going to use in the chapter work, power, energy. So, let us see some numerical problems which came in the past. So, let us deal with some of them. So, I read a few questions out here, and then those questions are there in the book as well. So, first question, is this one. A crane pulls up a car of mass 500 kg to a vertical height of 4 meter. Calculate the work done by the crane. Mass of the car is given 500 kg. We are lifting it by a crane to a height of 4 meters. So, height is given 4 meter, and they are asking to calculate the work done. We see height is given and we are lifting, that means work formula directly will become mgh. Just put the value and find the answer. 500. The value of g will be mentioned in the question paper, either 9.8 or 10. So, let us use 10 just now, and height is given 4. The answer will come 20,000 joules. That's it. This problem is solved. So, now I read another question. A force of 10 Newton displaces a body by a distance of 2 meter at an angle 60 degree to its own direction. Find the amount of work done. This time force is given 10 Newton. Displacement is 2 meter, that means S is given 2 meter, and angle is given 60 degree to its own direction, that means theta is given 60 degree. Naturally, the formula now of finding work is W is equal to Fs cos theta. F value is 10 multiplied by S, that is 2 cos 60 degree. So, now we will calculate. This is coming 20, cos 60 is half, the answer will come 10, unit will be joules, 10 joule. So, this is done. Now, the another question is over here. Which says a boy of mass 40 kg, runs up a flight of 50 steps, each 10 centimeter high in 5 seconds. Find first part, the work done by the boy, and the second part says the power developed, and the value of g is given 10 meter per second square. So, I just use the informations. Mass is given 40 kg, and there are 50 steps, and the height of each step is 10 centimeter. So, I will be writing total height 50 steps, 50 multiplied by the height of each step is 10 centimeter, that means it is coming 500 centimeter. This is the total height climbed by the boy while taking up the steps. Total height is 500 centimeter. We will immediately change into meter. So, 500 divided by 100, the answer is 5 meters. So, height is coming 5 meter. Now, we have height given and finding work. So, W is equal to mgh, mass is 40, the value of g is 10, height is 5. The answer will be 2 2000 joules. This is the answer of first part. Now to do the second part, it says find the power developed. And the formula of power we have work by time, because work we calculated 2000 and the time is given 5 seconds, because the boy is climbing these steps in 5 seconds. So divide by 5. So answer is coming 400 watts W. So this problem is also solved. Now I read another question which says a man exerts a force of 200 Newton in pulling a cart at a constant speed of 16 meter per second. Calculate the power spent by the man. This is a direct problem which says that a man is exerting a force of 200 Newton. That means force is 200 Newton in pulling a cart at a constant speed of 16. Speed is given, constant speed is given, that is V is given 16 meter per second, and we have to find the power spent by the man. So power formula we have F into V. Now in this case we will apply this. This is a suitable formula for this situation. So force is 200 and velocity is 16. The answer will come 3200 watt. So finished. Now the next question is over here. It says the work done by the heart is 1 joule per beat. The work done by the heart is 1 joule per beat. Calculate the power of the heart if it beats 72 times in 1 minute. So power we are finding, and work is given 1 joule per beat. So write work done first, write W. In 1 beat 1 joule is the work done. So there are 72 beats. That means the total work will be 72 into 1, that means 72 joules. That means total work done, total amount of work done by the heart in 72 beats will be 72 joules. Time is given 1 minute. 1 minute will change into seconds, that means 60 seconds. Now find power. So power formula is work by time. So work is 72, time is 60. So on cancellation, answer will come 1.2 watt or 1.2 joule per second. These are the simple type of problems they have been given in ICSE. So we will be just using the formula and finding the answers. Now another question is over here. It says an ox can apply a maximum force of 1000 Newton. It is taking part in a cart race and is able to pull the cart at a constant speed of 30 meter per second while making its best effort. Calculate the power developed by the ox. So for F is given 1000, velocity is given 30, find power, just multiply and get the answer. Now I will be doing another question. It says if the power of a motor is 40 kilowatt, power value is given 40 kilowatt, power of the motor, and it is used to raise a load of 20,000 Newton with certain speed. You have to find the value of that speed. So velocity is unknown, load is given, load means force is given, load means force is given this much Newton, 20,000 Newton. You have to find the value of V, with what speed it will raise the load of this much. So formula is now P equal to F into V. Power is given 40 kilowatt. So 40 kilo means 1000, so we will be multiplying by 1000, that means 40,000 watt. Force is given 20,000. 20,000 into V is unknown. We will calculate the value of V will be 2 meter per second. is the answer. So these are direct problems based on formula which can be done easily. Now we will be doing the problems based on energy. Maybe you have to find kinetic energy or potential energy. When there is height, so there will be potential energy, we will calculate potential energy, and when there are velocities, there we will be using kinetic energy formula. So question says, a body of mass 5 kg is taken from a height 5 meter to a height of 10 meter. Find the increase in its potential energy. The value of G is given 10. So let us write down the information given first. Mass is given 5 kg and we are taking it, lifting it from a height of 5 meter to a height of 10 meter. Then there are two heights given. So H1 is the initial height given 5 meter, H2 is the final height given 10 meter. We are lifting the body from a height of 5 meter to a height of 10 meter. And the value of G is given 10, small g is given 10 meter per second. So find the increase in potential energy. So we can do this problem by two methods. We can first find initial potential energy, initial potential energy, that is U1, that will be mg and the height h1 will take. So mass is 5, g is given 10, height is h1 is 5, so answer is coming 250 joule. Now we will find final potential energy, that is U2, so mg h2. So mass is 5, g is 10 and second height is given 10, the answer is coming 500 joules. Therefore increase in P is equal to 250 becomes 500. So how much is the increase? We can subtract and find the answer. 500 minus 250, the answer is 250 joules. This is one method. The another one is a shorter one. We can directly do like this, increase in potential, second method, alternative method. Increase in PE equal to, directly we can add mg, height is h2 minus h1. We can do directly also like this. So you can put the value, mass is 5, g is 10, height is 10 minus 5. So 5 5s the answer is 250 joules. So this is a shorter way this problem can be done. So there are two methods, any one we can follow. Now the another question says, a body of mass 5 kg falls from a height of 5 meter. How much energy does it possess at any instant? Question says mass is given 1 kg and is falling from a height of 5 meter, h is given 5 meter. How much energy does it possess at any instant? G is given, take the value of G in the question is as 10 meter per second square. So energy at any instant, that is total energy at any instant will be equal to direct formula mgh, because we know energy remains constant at all the points. Last time we had done the theoretical verification of law of conservation of energy. Total energy at all points remain the same, whether the point is the topmost point or the midway point or a point just before reaching the ground or anywhere, the total energy remains constant. So mass is 1, g is 10, height is 5, so answer is 50 joule. Now We'll see another type of question. Calculate the kinetic energy of a body of mass 2 kg moving with a speed 10 meter per second. So I'll write down information. Mass is given 2 kg, moving with a speed 10. Speed and velocity is same here because v is 10 meter per second. You have to find kinetic energy. So kinetic energy K is equal to, the formula says half mv square. Half mass is 2, velocity is 10, so 10 square. So answer is coming 100 joule. This is answer. Simple problems. Then another question is over here. How fast should a man of mass 60 kg run so that his kinetic energy is 750 joule? Mass of the man is given 60 kg. Let us write down information. Mass is given 60 kg and he has to possess total kinetic energy 750 joule. Kinetic energy is given 750 joule. We have to find the velocity with which the man should run. That means v is unknown. V is unknown. So formula is same. Kinetic energy is equal to half mv square. Kinetic energy value is 750 is equal to half, mass is 60 into v square. Now we will calculate the answer. V square value will become like this, 750 into 2 by 60. We will cancel. This is coming 25. Therefore v value will come 5. Unit we have to give meter per second. So the velocity of the man must be 5 meter per second. So this problem is also solved. While doing this kind of problem, we will make sure that all the quantities, physical quantities, are taken in the SI unit. All the unit must be SI unit. If somewhere gram is given, we will change in kg and then we will work this out. So now we are doing another type of problems. Now the question says a spring is kept compressed compressed by a toy cart of mass 150 gram. On releasing the cart, it moves with a speed of 0.2 meter per second. Calculate the potential energy, that means elastic potential energy of the spring. So they may give a diagram as well here, like this. There is a cart, toy cart is there, which is kept compressed by a spring. This one is compressing a spring here. Mass of the cart, m is given 150 gram. When we release it from the springs, it is moving with a speed of 0.2. It is moving with a velocity, after releasing it from the spring, it is moving with a velocity 0.2 meter per second. We have to calculate the potential energy of the cart. This is the toy cart. How to calculate potential energy? So in this situation, we will see what kind of energy conversion taking place. Spring stores potential energy. When you release it from the springs, that only provides the kinetic energy of the cart. So we will be writing the equation like this. Potential energy of the spring is changing into the kinetic energy of the cart. We can write like this: kinetic energy of the cart. The idea is very simple. When mass is given, velocity is given, what type of energy we can find? We can find kinetic energy. Let us find kinetic energy, but the question is demanding to find potential energy. So that only we have to think about the conservation of energy. Conversion of energy. from one form to the another form. There you will find that kinetic energy is provided by potential energy of the spring. So, energy conversion will follow. So, kinetic energy formula we have half mv square, writing half, mass is given 150 gram, gram we will not accept, we will change in kg. So, 150 upon 1000 will do, changing in kg. Velocity is 0.2, so 0.2 into 0.2 square is there, so that is why I am writing 2 times or the multiplication. Now, we will find the answer. The answer will be 0.003 joules. So, we have to see the situation where the energy conversion taking place. We will find one type of energy and that only will become the value of the other type of energy which question is asking you to find. Now, similar type of question we have it over here, which says a stone of mass 500 gram, a stone of mass 500 gram is thrown vertically upwards, with a velocity of 15 meter per second. Calculate A, first part, potential energy at the greatest height. Second part B, the kinetic energy on reaching the ground, and C, the total energy at its halfway point. Okay. Then let us write an information first. Mass is given 500 gram. Mass of the stone is given 500 gram. Is thrown vertically up with a velocity of 15. Velocity is given 15 meter per second. So, what type of energy we can find? Mass and velocity given, we can find kinetic energy. So, we will keep in mind that kinetic energy we can find by using this information directly. Now, the question is find potential energy at the greatest height. Question is asking find potential energy. So, potential energy, first part, potential energy at the greatest height will be equal to same value, kinetic energy at the lowest point, because kinetic energy at the lowest point only changes into potential energy. So, we will be writing equal to kinetic energy at the lowest point, that means from the ground level. The formula is half mv square. We will put the value half, mass is given 500, so 500 change in kg into velocity is 15, so 15 square, that means 15 into 15. We will cancel and find the answer. Answer will come 56.25 joule. 56.25 joule is the answer coming. Now, the second part of question, simply conversion of energy we are applying. Kinetic will change into whatever kinetic energy is given, that fully changes into potential energy when it reaches the highest point. Now, the kinetic energy on returning back to the ground, kinetic energy on reaching the ground, second part of question, on reaching the ground, we will have the same answer because the same potential will be changing back into kinetic energy. And the third part of question says the total energy at its halfway point, total energy at its halfway point. Total energy remains constant at all the points, which is equal to either the lowest point value or the highest point value or value anywhere else. So, 56.25 joule. So, all the answers are basically the same. The situation where we can find kinetic energy, we will find kinetic energy, and if the question is asking you to find potential energy, that only will be becoming the value of potential energy. Or the situation where height is given, we can find potential energy. that only must be changing into the kinetic energy. If the question asks you find kinetic energy, that only will find potential, that only will become equal to the kinetic energy. That is the idea we will be applying out there in this type of question. I mean, conversion of energy we must think of. Similarly, if the question says like this, a man is running with a speed of say 10 meters per second in order to take high jump. How high he will be able to jump? How to find that? Since the man is running, so what energy is having? Kinetic energy because of motion, because of the velocity, and he is changing his kinetic energy into potential energy. With this kinetic energy he is jumping some height. That means he is converting his kinetic energy into the potential energy. So we will be doing like this. That time we will be writing the answer like this: kinetic energy of the man is equal to potential energy of the man. Potential energy of the man. He is changing his kinetic energy into the potential energy. Kinetic energy formula we can write half mv square. Here we will be writing mgh. So m and m cancel. Thus a mass of the man in this question may not be required. We can do directly now half. Velocity of the man is say 2 meters per second or maybe 10, whatever is given. Let us take 10, so 10 square then is 10 into 10. G value is 10 into height is h. Let us cancel it. H value will come 5 meters. So with this velocity he will be able to jump a maximum height of 5 meters. The problem is solved. Same way the question says something is falling from some height. Water is falling from some height, maybe 50 meter height. What will be the velocity of the water on reaching the ground? How to find that? Height of through which the water falls is say for example 50 meter, and you have to calculate the velocity of the water just before reaching the ground, or the velocity with which the water hits the ground. So we will again think of energy conversion. What energy conversion taking place? Water is falling through some height, that is potential energy is changing into the kinetic energy when it reaches the lowest point. That means we can write here potential energy of water is equal to kinetic energy of water. Kinetic energy of water. Potential energy formula we have mgh, and kinetic energy is half mv square. M and m cancel, that's why mass of water not needed for this problem. G value is say for example 10, h is given 50, half into v square. We can calculate the value of v. V square is coming 1000, that means the value of v will come square root of 1000. So answer will come 10 root 10 meter per second. That means maybe the answer is coming 31 point something. So this type of problem you may expect where the energy conversion is taking place even in ICC. So now the last type of problem we will discuss in this chapter is over here. Question says what happens to the kinetic energy of a body? What happens to the kinetic energy of the body when they have given certain cases when number one, mass is doubled. That is first case, mass is doubled. Second case, velocity is doubled. Velocity is doubled. Third case, both mass and velocity are doubled. And the fourth case, mass is doubled but velocity is halved. Let us take these 4 cases, and in each case we will be checking what happens to the kinetic energy of the body. What happens? Whether it gets doubled, it increases by or decreases by a certain amount. Let us find out that. What happens to the kinetic energy of the body when, first case, when its mass is doubled, second case is velocity is doubled, third case both mass and velocity are doubled, and the fourth case mass is doubled but the velocity is halved. They may give any such cases they may give. So, let us deal with these cases. Answer for first part we will be doing in the form of ratio, and then we will write comment. We can write K1 by K2. K1 means kinetic energy in the first case and kinetic energy in the second case. Kinetic energy in the first case will be half mv square. Now, the second case we are making changes according to the cases given, right? Half mass is doubled, so that is mass value I will write at 2m within bracket, and velocity nothing to do, so write v square as it is. Cancel it, half will cancel, this half cancel, mm cancel, v square, answer is coming 1 by 2. Let us make K2 the subject. K2 is how many times of K1, we will check that. K2 is coming twice of K1. That means kinetic energy is getting twice of the original case, that means getting doubled. Now we will write a comment, hence kinetic energy is Ke is also doubled. We will write that comment is also doubled. When mass of the body is doubled, then the kinetic energy is also doubled. Now case 2, same way we are doing for each type, for this type of question, right? K1 by K2 equal to, first case I will write half mv square, second case I will make changes according to the cases mentioned here. Velocity is doubled, whereas mass is same, so m is as it is, velocity is doubled, so write within bracket 2v, because velocity is now becoming twice. V it was, now it becoming 2v, but square is therefore square. Cancel it, half will cancel, cancel, you get answer coming v square by 2 square is coming 4, so 4v square, the answer is coming 1 by 4. Therefore, K2 is coming 4 times of K1. Then what is the impact on the new kinetic energy? The new kinetic energy is increasing by 4 times. That comment we will write. Hence kinetic energy increases by 4 times. This is how we will be solving this kind of problem. Now let us do the case 3. Similar way we will do. Similar way. So K1 is equal to, I write half mv square. K2 is equal to, as per the situation, mass and velocity both are double, that means this is half, mass value I write 2m within bracket, velocity I write 2v square. Now cancellation, after cancellation we have the answer coming mv square, here it is coming 2m into 4v square, cancel, v square cancel, answer is coming 1 by 8. Therefore, K2 is coming 8 times of K1. That means what is happening to the kinetic energy now? It is increasing by 8 times. Therefore, hence kinetic energy increases by 8 times. Now let us see this was case 3. Case 3. Now last case, that is case number 4. Again same way we are going to do K1 by K2. First case I write half mv square. Second case half. Mass is double but the velocity, mass will write 2m. Within bracket you must write. Velocity is half, that means v by 2. It was v before, now it becomes v by 2, becoming half. So let us cancel, half will go. The answer will come here mv square This is coming 2m into v square by 4. M cancel, v square cancel, 2 and this will cut, this 2 will come up. So 2 by 1. If question asks you find the ratio in the two cases, the ratio is 2:1. But now we are just checking K2. What is the value of K2? K2 is coming 2 K2 is 1. Therefore, K2 is becoming 1 by 2 times of 2 K2 is K1. Therefore, K2 is coming half of K1. That means new kinetic energy is 1 by 2 times of the initial kinetic energy. That means kinetic energy decreasing by half. Therefore, the kinetic energy decreases by 1 by 2 times. This type of comments we will be writing or concluding the answers with this type of comment. So, this chapter is complete. Work, power, energy. Today we did the numericals only on this chapter. Problems are quite simple in this chapter. Basically formula based, and some cases we have to think about the energy conversion. Sometimes they may ask you to find ratio, or they may ask you to give a comment when you are changing certain conditions. So, chapter number 2 is complete. So, now in the next class, my dear students, I will be starting chapter number 3, which is machine. That you will see in my next episode. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, children. Moving on with our ICSE poem syllabus, today we are going to move on to the next poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The most important point here is, before we understand the poem, before we know the theme of the poem, before we understand the central message or the idea in the poem, it is very important to note the background of the poetess. Without that, what the poem is conveying remains incomplete. The poetess was a black African American writer and a civil rights activist who, from her early childhood, suffered from racial abuses, racial discrimination, and racial inequality, obviously in the hands of the white. Being a black, being a Negro, the poetess Maya Angelou suffered all these from her early childhood. And therefore, these abuses and discriminations had caused a deep scar in her mind, in her psyche, and it was always there in her subconscious mind. And this theme of racial abuses, prejudices, discrimination, racial inequality, these are what she highlights in her poems, especially in the poem I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Now, you will have to understand this phrase, I know. What does the poetess know and why? Since the poetess was a victim of racial abuses and discrimination, she knew why the caged bird sings of freedom, as the condition of the caged bird is the same as her own condition and the condition of millions of blacks like her. What does a caged bird sing about? Obviously, it sings about its desire for freedom. What do the blacks sing about or desire? Freedom from racism. And that is why, being herself a victim, the poetess knows why the caged bird sings about freedom. That is what this phrase in the title of the poem refers to. Now, in this poem, you will see the poet is using a contrast. The contrast between a caged bird and a free bird. Actually, in the poem, the caged bird is a metaphor for the black people. Caged bird stands for the blacks. The free bird is a metaphor for the white people, meaning the free bird stands for the white people. And through the contrast between the miserable condition of the caged bird and the free, joyful, happy condition of the free bird, the poetess is highlighting the sufferings of the black people. Now, before we come to the first stanza of the poem, you will have to be very, very careful. I repeat, you will have to be very, very careful with the words that are used in the poem. The words have been picked and chosen by the poetess very carefully, methodically, because the words highlight what she wants to convey. And the words also bring out the contrast between the caged bird and the free bird. So I will also highlight those words which are important for you in the examination, and most importantly, why are they important from the examination point of view. So let us move on to the first stanza. The first stanza begins with a description of the free bird. And I told you the free bird here represents the white people. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind. A free bird flies along with the current of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends. Whenever there is not enough favorable breeze to fly, what does the free bird do? It stops flapping its wings. It glides and skids through the air with the wings spread but not flapping, and sometimes they dive downwards towards the ground and dips his wing in the orange sun rays. When the bird glides through the air with outspread wings which are not flapping, imagine the orange sun rays fall on the wings. The orange sun rays are also symbolic. The orange sun rays are symbolic of the joy, the freedom, and the happiness which is experienced by the free bird. That is why it says, and dares to claim the sky. Imagine the free bird can fly anywhere it wants or likes, and therefore the entire sky, the vast limitless sky, is its own. The sky is its home. What do you notice in this description? You will notice that the poet specifically uses certain words. See? Leaps, floats, dips, dares. These words represent the joy of the free bird, the happiness of the free bird, the freedom of the bird. Remember, this free bird can go whenever and wherever it wants. It can fly the way it wants. It can flap its wings. It can glide. It can stop flying. It can fly up. It can fly down. It can rest on the ground. It can do whatever it wants. This freedom to do whatever it wants represents the freedom of the white people. They also are free to do whatever they want. They have abundance of chances, opportunities in their lives which they can effectively utilize whenever, wherever, in whichever way they want. Now, when we come to the second stanza, we will see that technique of contrast. In the second stanza, we move to the condition of the caged bird. And again, the poetess has chosen certain words very, very carefully in order to bring out that contrast. Now let us see what is the condition of the caged bird and which are the words conveying its miserable condition. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage. Imagine this bird is inside a small, narrow cage. Inside the cage, there is not enough space even for the bird to walk comfortably. So, the bird inside the small cage walks uncomfortably, awkwardly. Now contrast. In the first stanza, we were told that the free bird flies anywhere, flying compared to walking uncomfortably. Vast, unlimited space of the sky, which is the home of the free bird, contrasted with the small, narrow space of the cage. Can Sheldon see through his bars of rage? Again, see the contrast. When a free bird flies in the air, when it looks down, it can see a vast, huge, unlimited area. But the bird in the cage can only see whatever is visible through the rods of the cage. So its vision is limited. It can hardly see anything except for what is visible through the rods of the cage. What is the condition of the caged bird? It is helpless, but at the same time, it is also in rage. It's angry because it is in a miserable condition, in a helpless condition without freedom. It's bursting with anger. But that anger cannot be shown outwardly because it is in a hopeless, helpless condition. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied. Now, obviously, remember, the wings of this caged bird are not cut. Its feet are not tied because it's already in a cage. It is imprisoned already. What is the use of cutting the wings or tying the feet? It cannot fly anywhere. These are symbolic of its imprisoned, miserable condition. It is in the cage as if its wings are cut, as if its feet are tied, and that is why it is unable to fly. And what does the caged bird do when it is unable to fly? And so he opens his throat to sing. So the caged bird starts singing loudly. It sings about freedom because that is its dream, that is its ambition, goal, and desire in life. Again, when you look at the second stanza, bringing out the condition of the caged bird, you will see again the poetess has chosen certain words very carefully. Look at the words: stalks, narrow, seldom see, clipped, tied. These words are showing its imprisonment and lack of freedom. See, the free bird flies. This bird can hardly walk. The free bird has the unlimited sky to fly. This bird is confined within the narrow cage. The free bird can see anything and everything. This bird can hardly see anything. That bird can fly freely with its wings. Here, the wings appear to be cut and the feet appear to be tied. That is why it cannot fly. So you see the contrasting words used by the poetess to bring out that sad, miserable, helpless condition of the caged bird. And here you have two figures of speech in this stanza. Seldom see, repetition of the consonant sound S, therefore alliteration. And this bars of rage is symbolic. The point is, you know, this bird has not done anything wrong, and yet it is living like a prisoner within the bars of that cage. And therefore, it's bubbling with anger. Anger is accumulating in the heart of this caged bird, but this anger is useless because it can do nothing. Now, we continue in the third stanza with the caged bird only. The caged bird sings with fearful trill. We have already seen that the caged bird sings about freedom. But when the caged bird sings about freedom, something happens. It sings, but the voice shakes, trembles with fear when it is singing about freedom. Why? The reason is that even though the caged bird is singing about freedom, which is something very good and positive, there is still a fear in the subconscious mind of this bird because it knows it will never get that freedom about which it is singing. And that is why the voice is shaking and trembling with uncertainty, because it knows it will never get what it is singing about. Of things unknown but longed for still. What does the caged bird sing about? The caged bird sings about freedom. It also sings about the things or the objects which it has never seen in its life, but always wished and desired to be seen. That is why the word longed, wished and desired. It sings about objects and things which it wished and desired to see, but knew that it will never be able to see. Now, in the next 4 lines, there is a very, very serious symbolism. And his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. Now listen carefully. The point is, When the caged bird sings about freedom loudly, its song, its voice can be heard in faraway hills. People can hear, other animals and birds can hear about its song, about the theme of the song, which is freedom. But now come to the symbolism. From the cage, this bird sings about freedom. It sings about its desire for freedom. Everybody hears it, but nobody comes to free the caged bird. Nobody comes to rescue the caged bird. Despite its appeal and cry and song of freedom, its condition remains the same. Similarly, when you take this symbolically, the black people had been crying for freedom for centuries. Everybody in the world can hear these cries of freedom of the black people. But nobody does anything to make the lives of the blacks better, to free them from racism, to free them from racial abuses and prejudices. Nobody is bothered to give them equal rights as enjoyed by the whites. So, the condition of the caged bird, despite the song, remains the same. The condition of the blacks, despite their crying and mourning, remains the same. Now, we move on to the fourth stanza. Remember, this fourth stanza is not about what is happening. It is what the free bird is thinking. And you know, when you think and you get what you think, or you expect to get what you think of, that is also a kind of freedom. That is why the poet says, the free bird thinks of another breeze. The free bird thinks of another favorable breeze when to fly. And the trade winds soft through the sighing trees. Listen, the trade winds were the winds which favored the movement of ships during the medieval period. Here, the winds refer to the fact that whichever wind is favorable for the free bird to fly, it will fly, taking the help of that wind and go wherever it wants. It can go to another country. It can pass over forests. That means the freedom to go to any country in the world, to any forest anywhere in the world. Now the point is, you know, this sighing trees, this phrase is a personification. Trees don't sigh, trees don't cry. But when the breeze blows and the trees shake and make a sound, that sound is like as if the trees are making a sighing sound, as if the trees are crying, thinking about the contrast between the free bird which is flying and the caged bird which is imprisoned. I repeat, this is what the free bird is thinking. It is thinking it will get a favorable wind. It is thinking it can fly to any country. It is thinking it can fly to any place. It is thinking it can fly to any forest. Now see the next thought. And the fat worms waiting on a dawn bright lawn. The free bird is thinking of the fat insects which are on the green lawns of houses early in the morning, which it can catch and eat. Meaning, the free bird has the freedom to pick and choose what it wants to eat. And he names the sky his own. He considers the sky to be his home, which is similar to the concept as said in the first stanza, last line, dares to claim the sky. Now I repeat, in stanza 4, what is happening? The poet is giving us a picture of what the free bird has the freedom to think. I told you, it can think of going to another country. It can think of waiting for another favorable breeze. It can think of going to any forest anywhere in the world. It can think of eating, picking and choosing whatever it wants to eat, and it can think of considering the sky to be his home. Please note, this entire fourth stanza is basically symbolic. This positive thinking of the free bird, going anywhere, eating anything, considering the sky to be his home, these are symbolic of the abundance of chances and opportunities which are available to the white people. They are so free that they can pick and choose whatever they wish and want to do in life. So you see, the positive wishful thinking of the free bird is symbolic of the wishful thinking of the white people. They can think what they want to do, where they want to go, what they want to eat, because they have an abundance of choice. They have plenty of opportunities. They are bombarded with opportunities. It is for them to pick and choose. Now, from the free bird, again in the fifth stanza, we come back to the caged bird. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. Where does the caged bird live? It lives in the cage. The dream of freedom is born in its mind in the cage, and that dream of freedom also dies in the cage because it never gets freedom. That is why the grave of dreams is again the cage which is symbolic. This cage is like a grave. Dreams are born here, dreams die here only, because this caged bird will never get freedom. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. Shadow. This caged bird is compared to a shadow because shadows are unreal. You know it from physics. Similarly, this caged bird in the cage, imprisoned, freedomless, is living an unreal existence. It knows it will never get freedom. And what is life and existence without freedom? And that is why when this bird sings or cries, it cries out of pain, out of unhappiness, out of shock, out of helplessness. Good dreams do not come to this caged bird. That is why his screams are filled with nightmares. Sad, sorrowful, frightening dreams that the caged bird sees are the nightmares. And these nightmares cause the caged bird to shout out of anger, helplessness, frustration, and hopelessness. That is why its existence is like a shadow, unreal. After that, you will see that the rest of the lines and the last stanza, they have been repeated. See, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. That is a repetition of the last few lines of the second stanza. And the last stanza, that is the sixth stanza of the poem, is an entire repetition of the third stanza. That is what I have written. Now the question is, I have told you earlier when we were doing the other poems that repetition is a device used by a poet or a poetess to stress and highlight what he or she wants to convey. In this poem, the poetess wants to convey the miserable existence of the caged bird. She wants to convey the frustrating, hopeless life led by the black people in this world. Her stress is on the caged bird, that is the black people. That is why, technically, when you look at the poem, out of the 6 stanzas you will see, only 2 stanzas are devoted to the free bird, 4 stanzas are devoted to the caged bird. The free bird has been brought into the poem only to use the free bird as a contrast to the condition of the caged bird. The stark contrast brings out more powerfully, more potently, the miserable condition of the caged bird or the black people. So, here in this poem, contrast is also used as a device, a figure of speech. You can call it juxtaposition also, because you will see that stanzas have been interpersed: free, caged, caged, free, caged, caged. They have been intermixed. This juxtaposition has been done to bring out that contrast. And most importantly, another thing you will have to remember, when you look at the description of the free bird, when you look at the description of the caged bird, you will see there are imageries, visual imageries, there are auditory imageries, which you can hear. See, these words, leaps, floats, dips. If you look at these words, shaking, trembling. If you look at the words stalks, narrow, clipped, tied, you can visually imagine the condition of the free bird as well as the caged bird. How freely and how happily and joyfully the free bird flies, and how miserable is the condition of the caged bird inside that narrow, confined space of the cage where it can hardly walk or see anything. These are visual images. Then you have auditory images, hearing. What are they? The singing of the caged bird. You can hear. The nightmare screams. You can hear. These bring out the contrasting condition of the caged bird's existence inside the cage and its dream for freedom. Singing about freedom, the dream, the desire. Nightmare screams, the helpless cries, the sorrowful, sad cries, the broken dream of that caged bird of ever getting freedom. Therefore, there are visual and auditory images in the poem. And finally, we come to the theme of the poem. From whatever we have done, it is very clear what the theme of the poem is. The theme is racial abuses, racial prejudices, racial discriminations, the ill treatment and the mistreatment given to the black people for centuries by the whites. So, in this poem, we see that the poetess is acting as a spokesperson on behalf of the black people, and through the metaphor of the caged bird and the metaphor of the free bird, through the devices of contrast and juxtaposition, the poetess is not only bringing out the sad and miserable, helpless condition of the black people, but she is also leaving behind a strong appeal to do something for the blacks so that they can be at par and treated equally with the whites. The last thing before I conclude, remember, the poetess herself was a civil rights activist in the 1960s and 70s. And most importantly, she was also associated with the greatest civil rights activist, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And they had tirelessly fought for, appealed for to the entire world that the blacks be given their rights and they be treated at par with the whites, because the blacks also have a right to live with dignity, honor, and respect in this world.